What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today is one of my favorite videos of the entire offseason. Today, we're going to look at, drumroll, my 2023 My Guys. Yes, my My Guys list is finally here. After a long offseason of many videos and finally, getting together a list of my favorite players heading into the 2023 season, here it is. Now, these guys are on the list for a couple of different reasons. One, for starters, of course, they're my favorite players to target this year. If I could head into my draft and get a majority of these players at their draft price, I'm in. I think I came away with steals at the draft, and I'm really happy with that. I also just think maybe these players aren't going to be, finished as the wide receiver one this year. But at their current draft price, I just think that they're really great steals later in the draft and getting severely undervalued for what they can really be. So rather than talking more, let's just hop into my number one quarterback for this year. And it's going to be Anthony Richardson as the QB 17 in PPR leagues, 123 overall on Fantasy Pros, ESPN's 123, Yahoo 109. So any platform you're really playing on the major platforms, you're getting this guy as your, 9th, 10th, 11th round pick anywhere you really go. And I just think this one's simple. If you've been on the video or if you've been on the channel long enough and seen my other videos where I talk about Anthony Richardson, it's easy. He has the cheat code. He's a running quarterback. I saw what he did at Florida, and honestly, as dumb as this may sound, I saw him in that preseason game take 2 or 3 read options and just look like Cam Newton. And that just solidified it for me. I know it's one preseason game, but I'm in. And I don't really care that he threw that pick. I hope he throws more picks because I don't want his draft price getting higher. The fact that I can get Anthony Richardson at QB 17 is just honestly ridiculous. If he plays every game this year, there's no reason he isn't going to be a top 10 quarterback as long as he runs. If he doesn't run, then we have a different story. But last year, for instance, Daniel Jones was the QB 9 in fantasy football. He threw for just over 3,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. He ran for 700 on the ground and 7 touchdowns. A quarterback who threw for 15 touchdowns in a season was the QB 9, finished as top 10 at the position, a QB 1 with 15 passing touchdowns. I think Anthony Richardson can do that in his sleep. Going at QB 17 is absolutely criminal. It's a steal. So I'll be targeting this guy everywhere in my drafts this season, easily. What's going on, everybody? So as you can tell, I'm in a different outfit right now. It's the next day. I shot the My Guys video and I was editing it, and then luckily I didn't post yet. Raheem Stevenson now has a new running mate with Zeke Elliott. So Raheem Stevenson is my next My Guy. And you might think, oh, okay, so why are you still talking about him since Zeke signed? There's no way he's a My Guy still. But he is. I think this honestly is a really perfect situation for Raheem Stevenson in terms of ADP. Before, Raheem Stevenson was the RB9, 23rd overall on Fantasy Pros, 31st on ESPN, 23rd on Yahoo. And that's cool, right? That was kind of a hefty price to spend. But now, Stevenson's got to go in the 3rd round. There's no way he's going to go at the back end of the 2nd anymore. People love Zeke Elliott. And I don't know why. The guy's been washed for 2 seasons. Last year was it was proven. Dallas decided, we're good. We're not going to bring you back for $6 million like New England did, which is really only like $3 million, and the rest is incentives. But I don't know. I tell myself, is Zeke Elliott really even a good player? Last year, Tony Pollard averaged 5.2 yards a carry. Zeke averaged 3.8. That's almost a yard and a half difference per carry. Now, I know yards per carry isn't everything, but when the guys basically split the touches and had nearly an even split of touches, come on, man. How much more do we need here? Zeke is nothing but a big power back at this point in his career, and that's what he was 2 years ago. That's what he was last year. Now, that worries me a little bit for Raheem Stevenson, who was in a backfield with Damian Harris all last year. Raheem Stevenson still had a good year, but touchdowns were an issue. I believe he finished with 5 rushing touchdowns. It's not great for your RB1, but now at this price, I don't think you're going to have to draft him there. And once again, for the millionth time, you'll hear it all throughout the video. I would rather take a good player in a bad situation than a bad player in a good situation 10 out of 10 times every day of the week. Mark it down. I think Raheem Stevenson is a significantly better player than Ezekiel Elliott, and I don't even think it's close. I don't even think they're in the same spectrum. Zeke might steal some touchdowns, but at the end of the day, I just saw Ramondre Stevenson go out last year and get 88 targets, catch 69 balls. I mean, dude, that's good, man. 70 catches. Do I think Zeke might take a couple of those? Sure. But I think at the end of the day, Ramondre Stevenson is going to be the 3-down back. He just proved it. He might lose some touchdowns to Zeke Elliott. But in a Bill O'Brien offense where they really like to use one guy, and I have the touches here for Bill O'Brien's whole career with the Texans, where in 2014, Arian Foster had 300 touches in 13 games. Arian Foster had 85 touches in 4 games, but that's over 21 touches a game. That's a 340 touch pace over a full season. Lamar Miller in 2016 had 300 touches in 14 games. 2017, Lamar Miller had 274 touches. 2018, Lamar Miller and Alfred Blue had 405 touches combined. Carlos Hyde in 2019 had 255 touches, and Carlos Hyde sucks. So to me, I think any way you swing it, man, Ramondre Stevenson's the guy. I'm not worried about Zeke Elliott being a big factor. Is he going to have his games? I'm sure. But at the end of the day, I think Zeke Elliott is washed, and I think they'd be stupid not to use Ramondre Stevenson as the RB1 and the 3rd-down back, and maybe have him spell with Zeke a little bit here and there. But I still think it's going to be Ramondre Stevenson's job. I really believe it. So at the end of the day, if Ramondre Stevenson's ADP ends up falling to where he's like the RB 13, 14, 15, that's beautiful to me. That's music to my ears. I'm all in on that. The next running back on my list is a fan favorite of mine. You know that he's going to be on this list if you've been on the channel for long. It's DeAndre Swift as the RB28, 83rd overall, 91st on ESPN, and 81st on Yahoo. And I know you guys have been hearing the rumors about Kenneth Gainwell not playing in the first preseason game and Boston Scott also not playing, and that they are resting their starters, and I just don't believe that. I can't believe that Kenneth Gainwell, the guy who has never had any significant role really in the Eagles offense, is all of a sudden just going to be the starter. They brought these guys in. When you look at other backfields around the league where they might have got rid of their starter, like the Eagles just did with Miles Sanders, they didn't replace other guys, like Khalil Herbert. They got rid of David Montgomery, and they didn't replace him with anybody significant. Alexander Mattison in Minnesota, they got rid of Dalvin Cook. They didn't get anybody significant or draft anybody. You think it might be Kenneth Gainwell. They brought in DeAndre Swift, who, listen, injuries aside, is ridiculously talented. So good as a player when he's healthy. And same thing with Rashad Penny. Sure, the guy has played literally 42 out of, I think, possible 82 career games, so about half. But when he plays, he's really good. So I just don't think that you bring in these two talented players and you trade draft capital for DeAndre Swift to not play him. He's too good of a player when he's healthy. And we just saw Miles Sanders have a season of 1,200 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground. That's 279 touches gone. I think Swift can easily be maybe not the full-time back. Maybe he won't get all 279 touches. But if Philly went out and got this guy and decided not to use him in the passing game, I think you're wasting his talents. And I think the Eagles are too smart not to do that. The NFL changes year after year, and people are going to tell you they didn't pass to the running back last year. It didn't happen. Maybe they didn't have the guys to do it. You really think of that. Maybe they just didn't have the great pass catching back. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell was their best running back at receiving because that's all they really had. DeAndre Swift excels in the passing game. So I think if DeAndre Swift can go out and finish the season with 150 carries and maybe another 50 receptions, I think that's easy in the realm of possibilities, if not even more touches going his way. So I just think Swift at RB28 is going to probably be rocky week by week because that's just how it goes with, if you're drafting that running back, that's almost an RB3, right? It is an RB3, actually. Technically, it's an RB3. So you're going to get rocky weeks, but I think his upside is tremendous. It's huge on one of the best offenses in the league. So I love DeAndre Swift at RB28. This next guy I'm going to talk a lot less about. It's Khalil Herbert at RB35, 105 overall, 110 ESPN, and 88 on Yahoo, which is a little bit surprising. But what more can you really ask for from Khalil Herbert? Last year, he's been behind David Montgomery. I mentioned it earlier. They let David Montgomery just completely walk. They said, go to Detroit. We don't want you anymore. You're good. Thank you for your time. Khalil Herbert steps right in as the starter. He didn't play in the preseason game, and fair. Maybe they wanted to get the other guys some reps, but he didn't play in the preseason game. He's listed as the starter on the depth chart. And a starting running back going as the RB35, I mean, what else can you ask for? Chicago might not be a great team, but we love David Montgomery for all these years. And I think a lot of people, and I know you listen to other fantasy podcasts and you've been here, Khalil Herbert's pretty talented. So for finally a good player getting a shot on not a bad team, I said it before. I would rather take a good player on a bad team than a bad player on a good team. Any day of the week, you give me the good talent. And I'm going to take it with Khalil Herbert here as RB35. I think he'll rise a little bit as the preseason goes, as we probably solidify him as the starter. But there's no way he cracks the top 25. He might get up to your RB30, 28. Even then, I'm smashing it. I'm taking him everywhere I can get him. Now let's jump ahead to my favorite receivers for this year. And number one for me is Garrett Wilson as the wide receiver 10, 15th pick overall, 15th on ESPN, and 19th on Yahoo. I just think this one makes too much sense to ignore. Garrett Wilson had 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns last year with Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Joe Flacco. 3 zeros at the position. And now he has Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I don't think he's washed. I think last year was just not great offensive weapons that he could trust in, a year where he probably really didn't want to be in Green Bay. You have to look at it too as he's a human being. Like if you don't want to be somewhere, you're probably not going to be thrilled and be your best. Now he's in a new situation. He's reunited with offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, where I just saw for years, Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers produce, Devontae Adams, the number one receiver in fantasy multiple times, like a stud. Why can't that be Garrett Wilson? I think he's going too low. I know it's a bold call, but at wide receiver 10, the other guys going around him just don't have the upside that he does. You have your Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a good player for sure, but does no way possesses this upside. T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle, these guys I just don't think have the upside that Garrett Wilson really has, where Wilson could go out and be the number one receiver next year. I've seen Devontae Adams do it, and I think Wilson has the talent to pretty much replicate it. And if not, what's his worst outcome? Last year, it was 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns. You're telling me he can't do that again with Aaron Rodgers, even if he's washed or injured? I think it's easy for Garrett Wilson to just be a stud again this year. Next on my list is someone who I've talked about a lot on the channel. It's Deontay Johnson as the wide receiver 27. He's the 51st pick overall in PPR leagues, 52nd on ESPN, 60th on Yahoo. And Johnson is coming off, one of the worst seasons you could have had as a receiver in the NFL. It sucked for him, right? But I think he's coming as a steal as the wide receiver 27. It's just too low for what he can really bring to a team. Not including his rookie season, Johnson has never had less than 144 targets and 86 receptions. In 2020 and 2021, he finished with 7 and 8 touchdowns. And then last year he finished with 0. And I looked, since 2013, there have been 3 receivers that have had 100 targets or more that have finished with 0 touchdowns. Last year, Deontay Johnson. 2021, Laviska Shenault did it with 100 targets flat. And then in 2013, Hakeem Nicks did it with 100 targets even, 0 touchdowns. I just think it's statistically impossible for this to happen again. If things go back to normal for Deontay Johnson, where he's going to catch 90 balls on 150 targets for 1,000 yards, and he can go out and even catch 5 touchdowns, you're looking at like your wide receiver 16 there. That's a steal at wide receiver 27 on boards right now. And I don't think it's going to get any better with George Pickens just making a great catch in the preseason. I just think he's going to fall even farther. I like Deontay Johnson. Once again, for the millionth time, give me the good player in a bad situation over the bad player in a good situation. Deontay Johnson might not be in the best situation with Kenny Pickett under center, but he's too talented to get overlooked again and not be a stud this year. I have so much hope in Deontay Johnson. He is easily one of my guys this year. Next on my list is going to be Mike Williams as the wide receiver 31, 57th pick overall, 56th on ESPN, and 74th on Yahoo, which is pretty drastic. I mean, that's 20 picks off from what we were just saying. It's hard to believe Mike Williams has fallen so much. I like him as a great kind of post-hype sleeper. Last year, Mike Williams was going into the season as the wide receiver 17, and he had a decent year. He's an up and down player. It's just how he lives. That's the way it goes. He's up and down all the time. He has the big boom weeks, and then he has some really low down weeks. His high weeks are high. And right now, at wide receiver 31, you could get Mike Williams as your wide receiver 3, which is perfect. That's a perfect wide receiver 3 for your team. a guy who can win you some weeks and really help you out, and a guy with, if you have some studs, can make up for his lack of production. And people think he really had a down year last year. And he got injured again, which is another concern of his, which is probably why he's a little low on this list, is because he gets hurt a decent amount. But if you pace what he did over the 12 games he played, technically it was 13, but the one game he played 9 snaps. So, and he re-aggravated his ankle, I believe. So I'm not counting that game. So in 12 games, he would have averaged over a 17 game season, 130 targets, 87 catches, 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. Is that Mike Evans? I mean, who is that? You know, I mean, that's a wide receiver, maybe not a wide receiver 1, but that's a fringe wide receiver 1, mid wide receiver 2, easily. So we're just forgetting about this guy because they drafted Quentin Johnston, and Keenan Allen is back and he seems safer. I know Mike Williams is up and down, but a guy with this upside who could just be a boomer bust guy at wide receiver 3 for your team, I think that's a perfect roster makeup. Now, if Mike Williams is going as the wide receiver, like 17 like he was last year, maybe I'd be off of it a little bit more just because of his boom bust nature. But Williams being your wide receiver 3, that's a week winning pick. So I love Mike Williams going as the wide receiver 31, and he's easily a my guy for me this year. All right, and the last guy I want to talk about, we're going to transition into the tight ends. It's Darren Waller as the tight end 5 or 6. I've seen it different everywhere. 70th pick overall, 58 on ESPN, and 78 on Yahoo. Now, Darren Waller to me is just the last guy on the list here of tight ends where you possess really massive upside. This guy can be elite. And at the worst, he's just an okay tight end for you that you drafted in the 6th, maybe the 7th round, depending on kind of what format you're in. And, he's going even later in non-PPR league, half PPR. So when you look at Darren Waller, maybe it's worth taking the risk on him instead of drafting Mark Andrews, in the 3rd round, George Kittle in the 4th or 5th, when you can get Darren Waller, who can also be elite, in the 6th. This guy is the last chance you really have of a guy finishing as a tight end 1, probably not 1 because of, Kelsey, but tight end 2, finishing as the tight end 2 right behind Kelsey. It could be Darren Waller easily. He's been down the last 2 years. He's been injured, and I just don't like Derek Carr much as a quarterback. Now, I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones guy, but say it with me. If you've been watching this far, I would rather take the good player in a bad situation than the bad player in a good situation. And right now, I think Darren Waller is going to be the focal point of that offense next to Saquon Barkley. Through the air, it's Darren Waller and no one else. If he can stay healthy, even if he doesn't break out and have a crazy year, I think baseline, he's having you an 800-yard season, 4 or 5 touchdowns, and 70, 80 catches. That might be a little early to take at, your tight end 5 in the 7th, 6th, 7th round, but with that upside that I know he can go for 1,000 and 8 touchdowns and 100 catches probably, realistically, I think Darren Waller is worth the pick. And all right, those are my 2023 my guys. Now, I know these guys were a little bit lower on the list than I usually do. I usually have guys like Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb on the list, but I just didn't think it made a lot of sense to put a lot of the top guys on the list this year. I had some, Raheem Stevenson, Garrett Wilson are pretty up there, but I liked my list. I feel really confident in all of these guys that where they're going right now in drafts are absolute steals, and I'll be happy to have a roster of these guys coming up in my drafts. If you liked the video, leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more content. As I'm recording this, it's August 14th. It's August 14th, and we have plenty of time till drafts. We're still 2 to 3 weeks out. So if you're getting back into the swing of things, stick around, subscribe to the channel for more content. It'll be coming your way shortly. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.